Great. And so the legislation's being considered both in the US and in Canada, and the British government, and presumably many more, are considering legislation around privacy that's going to allow them to access information without warrants. And I guess I can probably imagine what your view will be on that, but what do you see as the risks with that, and what and what should be done about it?
So I don't have all the details on all the bills outside of the United States, and I see sort of two major. So to sort of repeat what I said a little bit earlier, I see kind of two major issues, and the first is this idea that you mandate companies to collect more data than they need to do their businesses. This is a very typical strategy. Right now in the United States, where you've got a bill called H.R. 1981, which is, I think it's Protecting Children from Internet Pornographers Act of 2011, or some other ridiculous name like that. And the bill itself, if you look at it, says, and internet service providers will be forced to maintain certain historical data on users. Notably, they don't say anything there about internet pornography or children or anything. They're just talking about every internet user. So the idea is you push companies to collect way more information they need under the auspice that, well, perhaps law enforcement might eventually need it later. And then you couple this with a legislative strategy to reduce the amount of paperwork necessary to get access to that data and to recategorize certain data points as being easier to access. So, for example, right now in the United States, location data is a bit less clear in the law than we would like it to be. So what we'd like it is so that if you wanted to get location data, you'd have to get a warrant the same way you would if you wanted to get information about the contents of a letter that somebody sent in the mail. But the law isn't as strong there as and clear as we would hope it would be. So these, and under Patriot Act, there was certainly huge expansion. It was sort of a wish list of law enforcement for everything they wanted, as far as what would allow them to access information about individual internet users, whether for fighting crime or what have you, but not necessarily simply for terrorism. Is one of the big misconceptions. The Patriot Act is not limited only to fighting overseas terrorists. It actually affects a lot of what we do. A lot of people here in the United States who certainly not even suspected of terrorist acts at all. So you have these kind of two proposals that are moving forward, which is, force companies that we rely on to get access to the internet to keep way more information, and then reduce the standards under which governments can gain access to it. And as far as what we need to do, we have to fight both of those really hard. And I think there's actually a very important and unique role that internet companies can play here, and have been extremely powerful players in this debate. In a lot of ways, mandatory data retention regimes, which is forcing companies to maintain data on users when they don't really need it, just because the government wants them to, have been fought off in the U.S. Historically, in large part because companies said this will cost us a ton of money and it's completely unnecessary, and we already give you tons of information under existing law. Why do you need more? You don't even do anything with the information we give you. So I'd say that it's really important that companies and people who are involved in tech companies resist pushes from the government to take more information than they need and make it available to law enforcement without proper authority. We've seen some pretty good acts by Twitter, for example, to resist the government asking them to hand over data about online activists without proper authority or any transparency whatsoever. So I'd say those are some ideas for how we could definitely move forward. Online activism in this realm is also important, and I'd say certainly being engaged as voters and voting on civil liberties lines is really important. And we recently saw with SOPA that you can have a big impact just by engaging with the public and making them understand what a huge issue their civil liberties online can be.
Absolutely. And So Google is updating its privacy policy at the moment. Have you looked at that, and do you have any views on it?
Yes. So Google's so the idea was basically that Google for a long time now has been integrating its various services. You know, it's gotten bigger, its privacy policy has grown exponentially, and the update to their privacy policy was to reduce it significantly and simplify it so that you would have what they called an intuitive user experience. So the idea is that you kind of have this, and this has sort of been a general trend of Google's, to make it so that when you used one Google product, it was understood that that Google product was part of a family of Google products, all of which were related to the same enormous company that controlled a huge amount of the web. So that is kind of what Google's strategy was with changing their privacy policy. I believe it specifically affected two data sets that previously Google had not been intermingling with the other data they had. And one was web history, so after you do a search and what you click on. And the other was what videos you viewed on YouTube. So the idea is that as part of this transition into this new privacy policy, which I think is about to take effect in like a week or two, they are going to be removing whatever cabins they had around YouTube data and web history data. As far as the ramifications of this, I know that there's a lawsuit in place right now run by Epic, which is a nonprofit in DC, trying to force the Federal Trade Commission to take action against Google. And I know that regulators in the EU have asked Google to delay the onset of their privacy policy from taking effect there. Nonetheless, I believe that Google will be moving forward with this privacy policy change on March 1st. And there are a couple of things regular people can do. You can go in and turn off web history in your privacy settings. You could actually, if you wanted to, try to set up 2 different Google accounts, remove all your YouTube videos from one and get it up on the other, perhaps taking some technical measures to make it harder for them to know your IP address. However, I think most people aren't going to do that. And I think what's going to happen is the net result is going to be a little bit less privacy for people on the internet, more data being combined. And while in an individual case we might say, well, they just put one person's search history together with one person's YouTube history, and, you know, is that such a big deal? But the thing is, this isn't one person, this is millions and millions of people that are, you know, using these services and trusting Google with this data and engaged in this service with certain expectations of privacy. So I am a little concerned about it. I do think it's inevitable at this point, and it's happening in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. So to slightly change tack, WikiLeaks. Julian Assange is still trying to be extradited, or he's not trying to be extradited. Other people are trying to extradite him to Sweden and to the US from Britain at the moment. And what are your views on that? What do you feel about the activities of WikiLeaks?
So WikiLeaks itself is